Welcome. You are watching episode 16 of 90 Minutes to Close the Loop on improving glass collection quality in the hospitality sector with a focus on ceramics. It is also the premiere of our new video, The Sound of Glass, and the launch of a Europe-wide awareness-raising campaign for the hospitality sector on the importance of separate collection for glass packaging and not to mix glass and ceramics in the waste stream. With us today are four guest speakers: Marine Tison, Public Affairs Manager at Hotrec; Jack Quick, Policy Officer at UK Hospitality; Hans Hilkers, Senior Quality Manager for Glass Raw Materials at Ardagh Group; and Danny Timmers, Business Development and Technology Manager at Malta Glass Recycling Group. Welcome to the four of you. You were over 100 to register for this episode, with people coming from 25 different countries in Europe and beyond. And we're pleased to see also a broad distribution from across the value chain, especially the waste management and glass recycling sector, but also some hospitality sector representatives. And these are the two sectors we are aiming to connect today. So the presence of also many extended producer responsibility schemes that are really crucial in doing that connection is also great to see. As usual with our episodes, we invite you to be active in the chat and the Q&A tab, and we'll take up your questions with our speakers. So first off, why the focus on the hospitality sector? Well, glass packaging is the prime consumer packaging. The biggest markets for glass are beverages, solid and liquid foods, as well as cosmetics and perfumery. This means that inevitably, glass packaging is almost exclusively purchased in retail and consumed in households, or purchased by hospitality establishments and consumed in bars, restaurants, cafes, or other professional catering venues. I like to call these mega households because the products are similar to those you would find in a household. The difference, of course, is the daily volumes. To give you an idea, there are over 2 million establishments in the EU and the UK. 56% are restaurants, 25% are pubs, clubs and bars, and 19% are hotels. We looked at what that means relative to population. It averages at around one HoReCa establishment for every 248 inhabitants. But this is even more concentrated in countries like Spain, Portugal, Italy, Cyprus, and Greece, where it can go up to one for every 109 inhabitants. In those countries, you could say that a HoReCa establishment is an extension of the living room. We estimate that almost 6 kilos of one-way glass is consumed per capita in the HoReCa channel annually. But when you look at the distribution, the biggest consumers are in Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, and Malta, which are all major touristic destinations. So a large part of this consumption is also driven by tourists. Major touristic destinations can double or triple their population in a single year. Within the HoReCa channel, there are two types of glass packaging with two different collection routes. Products can be either packed in reusable glass, which is a product loop, or in one-way glass, which is a material loop. For the glass collected for reuse, you order a drink, and after it is served, the empty bottle is placed in a crate, and the crate is stored, waiting for the next delivery. The crate with the empties is then taken back to the bottling site where it is washed, checked, and refilled to be delivered again, and so on. At one point, when the bottling line considers the bottle is too old, the bottle will be discarded and will be sent for recycling. As a consumer, you can recognize a refillable glass bottle from a one-way bottle because it can have rings around it from the rubbing off from other bottles every time it is brought back to be refilled. In this scenario, recycling an end-of-life refillable glass bottle is quite straightforward, as its disposal is not managed at the point of consumption, but at the filling line. For one-way glass, you order a drink, and after it is served, the empty bottle is placed in a bin. When the bin is collected, the glass is sent to a glass cullet recycling facility, where it is broken down and prepared to be recycled, preferably to be remelted in a glass packaging manufacturing process. In the study we conducted on glass packaging in the HoReCa sector, We focused on one-way glass packaging, as disposal of these containers happens at the point of consumption, which is a much bigger challenge. We also focused our analysis on beverages such as beer, cider, spirits, wines, non-alcoholic beverages, and waters, considering these product categories represent the bulk of products packed in glass that would be present in the HoReCa channel. Through our study, we were able to find out that of the 17.5 million tons of glass packaging placed on the market in 2019, about 3 million tons was one-way glass beverage packaging in the HoReCa sector. It's impossible to estimate the specific glass recycling rate of the HoReCa sector, but we can at least estimate that the HoReCa channel represents 17% of the potential for glass recycling. And if you add solid and liquid foods packed in glass and end-of-life refillable glass, it's probably fair to say that there is an 80-20 split between households and HoReCa in the EU and the UK. And this is also confirmed by data from the spirits and wine sector, as those product segments typically talk about a 75-25 split or an 80-20 split. So that would broadly be in line with our figures as well. In some countries, though, HoReCa can have a much bigger impact. For instance, in Greece, the figure goes up to 78%, or Portugal and Spain with 39 and 36% respectively. On the other hand, countries like Germany, Poland, or the Netherlands have a relatively small share of one-way glass tonnage in HoReCa, indicating a larger share of reusable glass in HoReCa. That is why every country and every situation must be approached differently. Now, I said earlier that a HoReCa establishment was like a mega household. Well, we estimate that a HoReCa establishment generates, on average, 1.5 tons of one-way glass beverage packaging per year. In the UK, that goes up to 3 tons, and we'll be hearing from UK hospitality later on. And in Romania and Latvia, it's close to 3. So this means that an effective collection system for HoReCa establishment needs to be put in place to help them manage this waste flow effectively and to send the material back into the loop. And this brings me then to the second question: why the focus on ceramics? Well, in these mega households, there are risks that glass and ceramics get mixed up when they become a waste. At the end of a long shift, separate collection may feel like an extra burden for staff before they head home. Now, if there is a broken dish or cup, it may very well find its way into the separate collection stream for glass packaging along with the empty bottles. Now, part of the answer is about convenience and making the collection systems as adapted as possible to the high volumes, limited storage space devoted to packaging waste, and the high collection frequency that HoReCa establishments require, while ensuring cost effectiveness for the whole system. But part of the answer is also about raising awareness. Later on, you will be hearing from the glass recycling and manufacturing industries as to why ceramics can cause problems for glass recycling and why the point of collection is key to guarantee the purity of the material and ensure it is recycled back into a closed loop. To act on this very specific point, we felt Close the Glass Loop could play a role in developing a piece of communication that, with the help of our network of European partners and national platforms, could reach out to the 2 million HoReCa establishments out there with a simple message: glass and ceramics do not belong in the same bin. We will show you the video very soon, but first I would like to invite Marine Tison, she's Public Affairs Manager at HOTREC, to say a few words. Marine and HOTREC are very active partners of our Close the Glass Loop community. We're really very happy to have them on board. It's really thanks to their commitment as well and their input that we have been able to build this simple message. So Marine, the floor is yours. Over to you. And a quick unmute, Marine. Quick unmute. Yeah.
Unmuted, it's better. Hello, everybody. And thanks, Jean-Paul, for the introduction and for saying almost half of the key points I had on my list to share with the audience, but so I will try to present it in a different way. So very happy to be here. My name is Marine Tison. I work for Autrec. So we are the European Association representing the hospitality sector in Europe. And by that, we mean hotels, restaurants, bars, cafes, you name it. Jean-Paul gave quite a few figures, but I will give a few also, just to understand what we mean when we talk about hospitality in Europe. So first of all, we're talking about 2 million businesses in the EU 27 that generate 3% of the EU GDP. And the hospitality sector, which is super important, employs 10 million people. So 2 million businesses, 3% GDP, 10 million people, with high gender diversity, different profiles, different background. And I insist on the people and the staff for this particular topic today, training our staff, focusing on skills and investing in skills in reskilling people. It's so important. Out of these 2 million businesses, we have a very large majority of micro businesses. By micro, we mean less than 10 employees, and it's about 90% of these businesses. On average, for a restaurant, we say that we have 5 to 6 full-time staff. And for the hotel sector, it would be more 15. Of course, it's an average that varies. We operate in the current context. It's a difficult situation, economic situation. We are a sector which is subject to external shocks. Geopolitical tensions have an impact on how many consumers spend and how many times per week they decide to take their family out. So this is quite difficult. And maybe another thing that Jean-Paul mentioned, which is super important in the context of the discussion today, is that we're also an industry subject to seasonality, tourism flows. So a destination who is managing waste during half of the year, which very low number of customers every day, will have to adapt his operations to have potentially twice the amount of customers, and then the impact of the waste generation or even more. So that's also something. So a lot of numbers. Just maybe to add something also, of course, what we need to bear in mind is that the sector is really diverse. So I gave a lot of number, but it varies a lot from an operation to another, from a location to another, whether you're a local cafe in central Vienna, where your customers will be regular customers, local residents, or whether you are operating a beach club somewhere on a Greek island, lucky you, and then the waste management generated and the system to collect the waste, etc., all of course very different. A large resort on a Spanish coast somewhere, or a small family hotel in the mountains in Austria, also different. So important also to bear that in mind. And also, Jean-Paul, you said it, but when we talk about sustainability and circularity in hospitality, we say that there is no one-size-fits-all solutions, and that we need to really have in mind the reality of the operators and provide them with the most tailored approaches. So some people will not like that, because of course sometimes it's easier to invest in large schemes that apply to all, but that's not how we see we can best be the most successful in appropriate waste management and recycling. Just a word on why sustainability is a strategic priority for us. 3 reasons. Of course, our businesses are deeply connected to where they operate. We depend on the local communities, the local environment, the nature where we are. Hospitality, it's my second point, is human-centric industry, and I mentioned training and staff already. I will continue to mention it. And so, of course, social sustainability is super important. We need to invest in our staff, in the well-being, and of course also in the customers' well-being. And the third reason why sustainability is such a strategic priority, it's also, and not just for us, but it creates long-term business value. Efficient use of resources in hotels and restaurants, it helps control costs, reduce risk, and it strengthens competitiveness. So these three reasons why sustainability is key for us, it leads me to all three sustainability priorities, let's say, in the sector. The first one is we have to preserve our environment and then limit the effects of climate change. We have to reduce our carbon footprint. By that, we need to measure, which is not always easy for small businesses like the one who are in the hospitality industry. The second pillar in this sustainable priority is that we need to implement circular solutions. So, of course, that's the topic of the day. And we need to invest again in training and staff. So, preserving our environment, I'm not going to focus too much on that, but if energy costs rise, or if local ecosystems and economies are degraded, then our ability to operate is at risk. And that's why our hospitality operators, invest heavily in energy efficiency strategies. It's one example. Renewable energy, smart water use, deployment of green areas, ways to mitigate and anticipate climate risks, and a way to renovate buildings, because of course we have a lot of buildings, part of the business that we have. And it's only to name a few, of course. And what is of interest for today's discussion, how to implement circularity in our establishments. Of course, we talk a lot about waste prevention, waste reduction, recycling. It's a core pillar of who we are in hospitality. It's something that needs to be said, but the hotels managers, the restaurateurs, and all of these people, they manage a lot of different waste streams every day. So that's why we are a key actor in that, but that also shows our real challenges or operational constraints when it comes to separating waste appropriately, and making sure it's properly collected and recycled. Um, I will come to glass. It took almost all my presentation without mentioning glass. So bear with me, Danny and Hans. But the circularity is not just about packaging and glass in our industry. It's also about extending the lifespan or furnitures in hotel. It's about reducing food waste. It's about changing the way we build menus to bring more non-meat proteins. It's all this, right? And of course, it's also about packaging waste, management of all these, and glass, which is particularly relevant for a sector, as Jean-Paul said it, so I don't need to repeat. Um, Beverage glass in particular plays a big role, and so we have to play a big role, and hospitality operators have to. 30% of all beverages sold in the EU are sold in hospitality, in hotels and restaurants. And hospitality venues are then major collection points for glass packaging, especially beverage bottles. And also, again, diversity, that's something we need to keep in mind. And Jean-Paul mentioned it with one way, reusable, different type of collecting these glasses. It depends also if you own a bar in a small narrow street in central Madrid. It's not collected in the same way as in a big remote location, and it has other impact and consequences on where you store this waste, and so all this also needs to be thought about. Um, Today, we talk about the necessity to make sure we don't contaminate the glass, which is wasted in our establishments. And that's why we're really, really happy to have partnered with Close the Glass Loop on this particular project. But we cannot do anything without training our staff. And that's why this particular campaign targets hospitality staff, making sure we share a very simple message. And again, I said it, but we are an industry, and the success of the hospitality industry relies heavily on the workforce. And we have also, currently in the current context, difficulty to recruit. We have huge labor shortages and high turnover. So having simple ways to train people and make them understand why it is super important not to mix glass with ceramic in this particular case, it's very useful. I think I covered most of the points I wanted to say, and I think I used all the 10 minutes I had. So Jean-Paul, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Marine. And I think it's always useful to get a bit of perspective. It's very possible that also in the audience, glass recycling will be front and center of their preoccupation. And I think that it's important that, when we think of the hospitality sector, you also show what's in the center of your preoccupations. And, maybe glass is a part of that, but it's only a part of many, many, many other considerations that you will have. And the other thing is then on the point of staff. So we will be showing now the video. Maybe just to say a word about it, it's a 50-second clip. But behind that 50-second clip, there is a lot more than 50 seconds worth of preparation. And part of that preparation was also to try and get that feedback from the members of HOTREC and from HOTREC on what would be the best possible way to approach such a message. And how can we put the people in the center of that message? So we have built this video together over the process of around, I would say it was about a year or so. I think we're very happy now to be able to present the result for you. So shall we show them the video? Let's go. Here is the premiere of The Sound of Glass. So that was The Sound of Glass, our 50-second clip that will be reaching out to, let's hope, 2 million hospitality establishments in Europe. I would like to thank my colleague, Vanya Necheva, for leading the project and taking us to this point where we are able to deliver the video, but there will be many steps following this point. Thanks also to Simona Bembo at the nursery for the delivery and production of the actual video. I would also like to highlight that this video will now be made available to be customized by local partners, so we can easily adapt the final message. We can add local sorting instructions. We can include your logos so that the video becomes your communication material. So we're especially interested in extended producer responsibility schemes who can take this kind of material up and use it towards their customers and the people they are serving in terms of the collection of the material. So if you're interested to be part of this campaign, it's very easily accessible. We make the video available for free, no cost involved. Our goal is to make sure that we outreach to the hospitality sector. So if you can help us do that, you can become a partner and help us with this video. All you need to do is get in touch with us. We can add the email in the chat, info@closetheglassloop.eu. Our goal is to make this relevant on national level. And so one starting point to try and understand how such a video could be made available on the national level and what kind of extra steps could be done. I will now then give the floor to Jack Quick, who is Policy Officer policy manager at UK Hospitality, who can tell us a little bit more about how the UK hospitality could potentially use such a video and what are the main challenges there in the UK. So Jack, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Jean-Paul. I'm always, it's always a tough act to follow, and I have to go after Maureen doing a presentation. But hey, I'll do my best. Just to sort of introduce myself and UK Hospitality quickly. So I'm sort of policy manager at UK Hospitality, and we are sort of essentially the trade body that represents the hospitality sector in the UK. So we have sort of 750 odd companies from right the way across the hospitality sector. So sort of pubs, bars, restaurants, hotels, cafes, you name it. We represent them, and sort of as a trade body, our role inevitably is to sort of advise our businesses and also sort of lobby the government to try and get the best deal for the hospitality sector. I will come on to sort of glass shortly, but I think before doing so, it's important just to highlight really sustainability in the hospitality sector in the UK and sort of where we are. So we, many years ago, partnered with an organisation called the Zero Carbon Forum to essentially sort of deliver the first roadmap to net zero in the sort of hospitality sector in the UK. And essentially within this, we sort of came up with some commitments. So our overarching commitment here that sort of many businesses signed up to was to reach net zero by 2040. And the slightly more pressing target, which is scary when you look at it on the slide, is a target in 2030 to remove all avoidable direct emissions, so our scopes 1 and 2, and that is coming pretty rapidly. Sort of generally in terms of where hospitality businesses are in meeting these targets, really, I think particularly sort of larger businesses are on track to reach that sort of overarching target, particularly for your sort of scopes 1 and 2. For reasons I'll talk about shortly, I think for your smaller businesses, this is sort of particularly challenging. And there's been sort of really, some quite slow progress, I guess, on scope 3, not for the lack of trying, but I think in the hospitality sector, around 90% of our total emissions are linked to our scope 3 emissions. So this really is an area that I know the sector's been working hard on over the past few years, but due to some of the cost pressures I'm going to come on to, some of the progress in that area has been a little bit slower. Just to talk about some of those cost pressures quickly, without sort of wanting to give anyone trauma related to the past few years, I think we're sort of all aware of some of the issues the hospitality sector and wider industry as well have had over recent years. I'll sort of refrain from mentioning COVID in this presentation, but it would feel strange not to. I feel like someone has to mention it in every presentation they do. But sort of energy continues to be a big cost challenge. Food price inflation in the UK also remains pretty high. So as sort of Maureen said in her presentation as well, some of those big external shocks do have quite a big impact in hospitality, and those are still having an issue sort of across Europe, but also the UK as well. Just to sort of hone in on the UK, over the past sort of couple of years, there's been some quite significant tax rises. So we've had areas like minimum wage rates, we've had national insurance, business rates, which are sort of some of your typical business taxes, I guess, that have all increased over recent years. And this is sort of where businesses are still dealing with debt from the last few years, energy inflation, and all of those areas I mentioned. So we sort of survey our members, and our data has shown that there's been around 100,000 job losses in hospitality in the past 18 months. And this is sort of, particularly important when we're talking about a topic like this and sort of ensuring that there isn't any contamination of glass. When a lot of these changes rely on staff ensuring that they are sort of upheld, when there is that high turnover of staff and job losses, it makes it sort of all the more tricky. Also, sort of a third of hospitality businesses are now operating at a loss. More than half have had to cut staff numbers. So again, just going back to that point I mentioned a moment ago about some of the burdens on staff, particularly in those staff who are there. And I guess the sort of point really is, why is this important to sustainability? Clearly, all of this is impacting businesses' ability to invest. This isn't just a sustainability issue. This is invest in, staff, invest in expanding your operations. But clearly there are knock-on impacts to sustainability as well. I think with all the sort of best will in the world and the hospitality sector, I think it's really quite a forward-thinking sector and has always really sort of held the torch and leading the light in sustainability. A lot of businesses are struggling, and that's particularly why areas like Scope 3, which tend to be a little bit more expensive and take up more time in ensuring that you're engaging with your supply chain to cut your emissions, and that's really why that's having an impact. And it is difficult, but hopefully over the next few years, things start to calm down a bit, and the businesses can focus more of that attention and investment in this area as well. Moving on to glass then and what's happening in the hospitality sector. Just starting with some of the regulation that has happened and is happening in the UK over recent years. So last year we had a significant piece of regulation come in called simpler recycling, which essentially sort of mandated the consistent separate collection of various waste streams. One of these waste streams was glass, which has to be sort of separated at the point of collection, but sort of can be mixed in with other dry recyclable materials, so sort of plastics and metal particularly. Jean-Paul's mentioned extended producer responsibility quite a lot. There's loads going on in the UK on this at the moment. We're sort of working pretty closely with the government to try and amend this policy, I guess, because it's been pretty problematic for the hospitality sector in the UK. And also your sort of bottle deposit return schemes, which you'll obviously all be pretty familiar with from a European context. But I guess the sort of point of this slide really is to sort of show that now is a really good moment for this campaign. Businesses are having to think about, as a result of this regulation, they are having to think about more about what they're doing with their materials, both from a cost point of view, also from ensuring that staff are aware of the regulations. And I think now for, cost reasons, but also sort of environmental reasons, there is a lot more of a focus of minimizing contamination, ensuring you're properly separating your waste streams. And I think that's really why it's a really timely moment for this campaign generally. And then just to sort of, I guess, reiterate that message, we're really pleased to be supporting this campaign. I think one of the real benefits of that video we saw a moment ago is the fact that it can be personalized. And I think, being able to personalize it and remind businesses also not only of the importance of this campaign, but also of what some of their legal requirements are with some of the legislation that's been happening over the past few years is a real sort of benefit as well. And particularly across the UK now, where there's a lot more starting to be a lot more conversation happening about reuse and the importance of reuse as well. It feels like a pretty timely thing. So really pleased to be supporting the campaign, and thanks for having me today.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks a lot, Jack, for taking us through the UK perspective on this. Maybe because you mentioned separate collection and the UK. So there is a a legislation around that, but what's a little bit distinct in the UK is that separate collection would be considered to cover, let's say, dry recyclable, so all packaging can be collected together, and that is considered separate collection, right? On the continent, it's true that separate collection tends to be rather monomaterial glass packaging. But if I'm just allowed a little thought experiment with you, so hospitality establishments are commercial establishments. Is it correct that they would in any case be required to set up their own collection system, or do they rely on municipal collection systems or local authorities to help them collect their packaging? Are they responsible to set up their own collection system, or can they rely on local authorities? Like, what is the situation for hospitality establishments in the UK?
Yes, I think there's probably two things to say. The vast majority of hospitality businesses in the UK have private waste streams. So they'll have a private company will be responsible for sort of managing their waste, which sort of feeds into a lot of the requirements that I set out there. The onus really is on the waste management companies to ensure that they are collecting the separate waste streams. And a lot of the conversations that we're having at the moment on issues like extended producer responsibility and that kind of thing are really sort of coming about as a result of those sort of private waste streams and businesses already paying for them in addition to some of these policies. I guess the other area to talk about is local authorities generally in the UK are sort of really struggling a lot with resource and finances. So there's been a lot of sort of high profile stuff at the moment about a lot of areas going on strike with sort of bin collections and the like as well, which sort of isn't helping from a domestic side of things. But the vast majority of hospitality businesses will have sort of private collections.
And so, putting the question of cost aside for a second, I'm just trying to think of, conceptually speaking, would it be possible for hospitality establishments, given they have a private collection system, to, let's say, set up a very specific monomaterial separate collection system for glass? I mean, even if the legislation and the local authorities would be working on the basis of all dry recyclables together for households, I guess because hospitality establishments have a private collection system, they could, if it was cost effective. And I don't want to get into the cost element, but could they theoretically set up, let's say, a monomaterial glass packaging separate collection? Like, that would be possible, right?
Yeah, definitely. So there's nothing stopping, and in fact, some waste management companies still do collect glass separately. So there's nothing stopping the waste management companies from saying, as per sort of your contract with us, it's all right, and we're collecting glass separately. So here's the separate bin for glass, and ensure that you're doing that separately. And some are doing that. So there's nothing preventing that from happening, and it is happening, but just sort of as per the legal regulations, that isn't the law, but there's nothing preventing that.
Okay, and then it's all the question about staff, staff reduction, also a lot of rotation. So I think if in any way this video can help, I mean, as we said, it can be absolutely customizable. I think also what could be interesting is to try and see how you could combine that with some other organizations in the UK who might also be legitimate and relevant to talk about, separate collection, recycling, to give it maybe some extra weight as well to the video. I mean, that could also be possible. We could have several logos at the end, right? Just to reinforce where the message is coming from.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more sort of collaboration that we can get on a topic like this, the better. We guys like British Glass, for example, we've had a few conversations with them on some legislative issues, and I think the more collaboration that we can get on a topic like this to ensure the video is sort of seen far and wide, the better, really.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jack, for having been with us and shared the UK perspective. Thank you so much. So we are now going to take a U-turn. Okay, we're going to move from the world of the hospitality sector and we're going to go straight to the glass furnace, the place where we're actually producing the glass bottles. And the idea is to try and get a better sense as to why we are highlighting this issue of not mixing glass and ceramics in the waste stream. One thing is to raise awareness. Another thing is also to understand why the challenge is a challenge. And we have, first off, Hans Hilkers, so Senior Quality Manager for Glass Raw Materials at Ardagh. I can tell you, he knows something about a glass furnace and the materials that go through it. So I will hand it over directly to you, Hans. Please take it away.
Okay, thank you, JP, for the nice introduction. And thank you all for joining us in this, I think, interesting but also very important topic. And also give us the chance to explain it all out of our perspective. Me from the glass container producing plants and Danny later from the glass recycling. I have put my presentation in 4 parts. And more an introduction, what are we talking about? Appearance, how does it show? What do we see? Container glass plants, what do we do to prevent it? The possible problems. And then when something slips through, what could be the possible consequences? As we always say, that the glass industry wants to use as much as cullet as possible. But besides our main raw material, it's also the most polluted one. One of the pollutions is stones. Beside that, we have something also metals, plastic, those kind of materials. But here we want to just focus on what we call CSP, ceramic, stones, and porcelain. You see some pictures how it occurs. We have the household waste, we have real stones, and everything what you can see in those pictures. This goes when it is in the incoming materials for glass recycling plants, comes with their glass in. Possible causes, of course, consumers who dispose of these materials incorrectly, and that can happen in glass bins, in container bins, everywhere, because sometimes it's very easy to put those articles, those pollution in a bin, and then you're rid of it. You don't have to dispose otherwise, so it's easy. Also, we have pollution coming from industrial glass streams, like filler companies, but also HoReCa establishments, where we are talking about today. I hope that when everybody has seen the video that we showed earlier, that this will also be improved a lot. When the material comes to the recycling plants, they have very high-tech processes to clean it up and produce and process this to what we call furnace-ready cullet. Cullet we can use safely in our furnaces. To be sure we can do that, we have a very extensive test program in our plants. In all our plants within Ardagh, we have quality labs where all deliveries of cullet are checked on pollution. And we do this very thorough because cullet is something more than a standard glass raw material. It has a different grain size, different appearance. So we take big samples, up to 50 kilograms from each truck, which we check manually in our quality laboratories. With the results we find there, we compare it to our specifications. And when it's out of specification, it goes back. We don't accept the deliveries, we send it back. You see here some examples, and these are real findings in the 50 kilogram samples we took in one of our plants, and from deliveries that have been rejected and have been returned to our recycling supplier. When you look at appearance, how does it show in our products? These are the pieces we sometimes find, or during a check, or later on a pile. When this comes into our furnace, it will come eventually in our products. And then it shows like this. Here you see some examples of bottles with a stone or a piece of porcelain in the product. You can say it's not so much, small pieces, but it can also have very big consequences. When you want to show it somewhat closer through a microscope, this is what you see. And what can happen is what we will show here. When you look in a container glass plant, this is a very schematic presentation of a plant from the raw materials till it goes through production to our warehouse, transport to our customers. There also we have a lot of machines to check our produced containers. Every container we produced is automatically inline checked on different defects. Can be wall thickness, can be pollution, can be inclusions like you see here. These are camera systems. One of such a machine, as you see on the left, can contain up to 12 and maybe 15 cameras that check the product from all sides. When we see something on the picture on the right, the material is seen as defect and is blown away from the main conveyor belt and is rejected. Here you see some examples of inclusions from CSP, so stones or porcelain, in our product. And when we have bigger problems, sometimes we have a lot. These are all things that we are happy have not gone to our customers because we internally have removed them from our products. Besides inclusions that can give problems during filling or later, it also can have high health and safety risk, because when the pollution is big, it can happen that when the glass is formed, that we cut our glass and that we cut on a stone, and that means that the glass will spread out to all the machines. Here on the left you see an operator working on a glass producing machine, and you see the yellow drop there is glass from 1200 degrees falling down, and in this case just beside his arm. You can imagine when you get that on your arm, it will have a big severe accident. Extreme, but it can happen when that glass comes in the machine. Of course, we have a very greasy environment. It can even lead to a burners of a whole plant. And people say always, yeah, but it's a small risk. It is, but it happens. It can happen. And then what happens when our glass recycling supplier doesn't get it out, that we don't remove it from our product stream? The next steps, when it goes to our customers. People of containers with inclusions can break during filling. Of course, this is annoying, not too much on health and safety, but it is a financial risk, because it will give stopping time, loss of products, because you have to be sure that when this happens, you have to clean up all the line where this bottle has been produced to make sure that all parts of glass laying there or running around are removed from the process line, because otherwise you have the risk that you have other products that you fill that contain glass pieces. Here it's only between brackets at the glass filling company. Another one, also not during filling, but after, during transport. When you see the red circle there, you see the point of breakage, and there was where the inclusion was. Still here, annoying, very problematic, but not from a health and safety risk. That is when it doesn't break during, or we don't find it, it doesn't break during filling, and it doesn't break during transport, because it can also happen when it reaches the end consumer. Here you have an example of a product that has been returned by an end consumer and that it caused injury. You see on the top, you see an inclusion that made the mold of the neck of the bottle break. And as it is glass, it will be very sharp and it will hurt people. This is of course a worst case scenario, but it still happens. And that's something we want to prevent by making sure that we have as less as possible pollution due to ceramics in our products. I'm a bit quicker than I thought, but thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Hans. So I think it's fair to say that it is a hazard. So the presence of ceramics in the glass waste stream is a hazard. It's also fair to say that the risk overall is minimal in the sense that there are multiple checks. So here we're talking about the checks that are happening before you're using that material in a furnace. But there are obviously checks before that as part of the whole recycling process. In terms of, let's say, number of occasions where you will come across this type of contamination, how regular is it? Is it uneven during the year? Do you typically find it in during certain parts of the year more than others? I mean, do you have any sort of view on the time frame of this?
No, it's not so depending on the time of the year anymore. In the past it was, because when the recycling industry was years ago, it wasn't so good as it is now. So now and then you had more problems due to the weather during the year. When it was a lot raining, wet product that is difficult to sort, those kind of things. That has all been overcome. But as you say, it's a low risk. But don't forget, although it's low, when it happens, the consequences are very, very serious, because you have to imagine that a glass producer produce a bottle that has this kind of a failure. It breaks during at an end consumer, or maybe in a supermarket. Then you have a real problem, because then you will have to take all those products out of the shelves. So the impact, although the risk is low, is very, very high, and that's the main what we want to show. I try to do it not too technical, because I try to keep it very pragmatic. If there's need for more technical information, we can also go deeper in it during the Q&A, also with Danny present. But although a low risk, and we see the instance that happens going down due to improved recycling, also improved systems in our sites, but it still happens. And also you have to realize that in the past, when I started in glass already a long time ago, our customers accepted maybe one breakage on 10,000. After a few years, it was 100,000, 1 on a million. But now, already for a number of years, they say we don't accept any occurrence. When it happens, we want to get everything out of the market, because we won't take the risk that we get a complaint and that we stand on the front page of a newspaper the next day. And that is what happens.
Yeah, so the requirements on your side from the customers are also increasing to the point where it's a kind of absolute zero request. So, okay,
Yeah.
so it's important to understand how the value chain functions and where the pressure points are. So that is your pressure points. So as you said, you'll be with us also for the Q&A, but we'll also then now hear from Danny Timmers over at Malta Glass Recycling, because we also want to understand all the steps that are in between the collection point and the furnace to try and make sure that sorting is happening in the best possible way for the closed loop to happen. But also, what are the challenges that you're facing, Danny, in your sector when glass is contaminated with ceramic? So, Danny, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jean-Paul, for the introduction. And yes, indeed, you raised a fair point. If I had to explain every step that's installed in a glass recycling plant, we would probably take a whole day to explain every kind of these steps that we have to put in our production process to get a material where my colleague Hans is happy with. So let's not go into that. First of all, let's say something about Malta. So we one of the leading glass recycling companies. I said not the leading, but one of the leading glass recycling companies. So we are mostly operating in the west of Europe. We have 6 plants. So we are in Holland, Belgium. We have 3 plants in France and 1 in Portugal. So mostly on the west part of Europe. So let's start with the first slide. We're going to explain what a CSP, like Hans did this already. The options that we as a glass recycler have to remove I always call it CSP, so sorry for that, but the ceramics to move from the process, the consequences in our recycling facilities, and how you, the listeners, and also closing the glass loop can help us, let's say, to ease in our job and to make, of course, Hans really happy. Start with the first one. This is already explained, but I'm going to repeat myself. So CSP stands for ceramics, stones, and porcelain. Now, stones, I think at this point is not, I say, really interesting. So we're looking at ceramics and porcelain because those are the things that we have to find in our input materials. Where does it come from? I think already explained, so maybe I'm going to repeat myself again. Household waste. So why is that? Now, you can imagine that if you are drinking a nice beer or lemonade or cola or whatever, you think, okay, this is a beverage, it's contained in a container of glass. So, yeah, really nice. I put this in the glass bin. But afterwards, you maybe have the interest in a liquor or a Geneva jar or drink, I would say. And then you think, okay, this is also a beverage, it's in kind of a bottle, so probably it goes into the same bin. Well, guess what? That's not really ideal. Why is that? Because this comes then to the glass recycling plant, and it's our job to take out all this kind of materials, which we call, of course, CSP. Also, when you look, and this is the topic of today, to the commercial sources, so the restaurants, hotels, and so on and so on and so on, I think there is the same idea. It's a beverage, it comes in a container, so it all goes into the same bin, which of course is again not ideal. And then also in the mixed waste streams, so if we do not sort and collect in the correct way, we get this kind of material in our incoming stream for the recycling. Now, it's in. We cannot do anything about that. Closing the glass loop will fix the problem. So we're going to teach everyone in all the world that they don't need to put and that can put the CSP parts in the glass. But how can you take it out when it's still in? Because we're not living in an ideal world, fortunately. So we have, let me say, automated, Jesus, and manual sorting. So that's the first and maybe an older step. And we have also what we call optical sorting, which is a more advanced technology. Let me start with the first one. You can see the picture on the right. This is actually a picture of a manual sorting where there are people standing on a belt for 8 hours trying to take out as much as they can ceramics that they see by their eyes. Now you can imagine that if you have to do this for 8 hours and approximately the material coming in is like between 20 and 50 tons an hour, and you have to pick all day all this kind of pollution. Yeah, it's really not an ideal world. So you have a repetitive work where you can have injuries of doing the same movement all day. It's a safety issue because you are with your hands in really sharp glass, which, as you can imagine, isn't ideal at all. And also, it has a really limited effect on the end quality, meaning you cannot take out every piece that's in there. You can only take out the big chunks where your eye falls on what you see, that you are able to pick. And of course, the ergonomics is also not ideal to do this. The second one, and this is common for, say, for the glass industry, is what we call optical sorting. Now you have these in all kind of different shapes and brands, but basically it's all the same technology. So let me explain something. So you have a light source on one part and you have a camera on the other part. So when an object falls through this machine, the light goes through the glass cullet and the camera sees the shape of the glass, even sees the color, even see if it's HR, which is heat resistant, but that's not the case in this presentation. But if a piece of ceramics fall through, there is no light transparency, meaning it's a black spot. So when that happens, the camera sends a signal to the computer, who then says to a lot of valves, and valves are something like a compressed air machine that blows away a particle, that says, okay, on this part of your line, there is a part called CSP and you have to shoot it out. Now, that worked pretty well, but to give you an idea of the amount of optical sorters that we have to put in to clean the glass so that Hans is happy with the quality that's getting into his furnace, we're talking about up to, let's say, 29, 30 of these machines installed in the production lines. Now, why is a piece of CSP bad? Because you're gonna lose a lot of yield. And what is yield? Meaning you have 100% of input material in your line, and you only get the material out that you can sell to the glass industry, and you have to take away all the shootouts of these machines. So the more CSP we have in our input product, the less yield and also the less profitability we have with the recycling plants. Now, why is that? Because if you look at the rejection and the shootout of CSP, you have to imagine that if it sees one part which is black and it needs to be shooten out, you don't want to shoot with compressed air only, let's say, 1 millisecond, because then you have the chance that you miss this piece. So what do? You put on the valve, let's say, 20 or 30 milliseconds, meaning you shoot in a way more range to get this piece of CSP out. What happens when you do that? First of all, you're pretty sure that the piece is out, but you also shoot glass, which is not so good because that, again, is a yield loss. Now, with all this kind of streams that you're shooting out, you have to invest again in what we call a CSP recovery line. So meaning this material that's been shooting out still contains like up to 90 to 95% of glass, which you want to send to Hans and not, let's say, put on a landfill. So then they have to invest in what we call a CSP line, and it retrieves again the glass from the shootout of your main line. Excuse me. If you then look into the, let's say, quality check of our incoming streams, and this is, I kind of keep it on the low level, but an average of 10 to 20 kilograms of input of ceramics in 1 ton of glass of incoming material is really still on the low level, but this is where we face with every day. So there is still a lot of this material and a lot of benefit to gain from this. We already saw this in the previous presentation. So before we can deliver even one lot of, let's say, 1,000 tons of glass to the glass furnace, there is a check. And the check, if it passes, you can deliver. Is it not approved, then you can't deliver. So in 1 ton of glass, and 1 ton of glass is kind of a big heap, I would say, you can only have maximum of 20 to 25 grams. Now, this number every year get smaller and smaller and smaller, because you heard it already, there is a risk at the glass furnaces. So by lowering all these numbers, we have to invest more and more and more into machineries. Why is that another problem? Not only for quality, but it also reduces efficiency. So the more we shoot out this kind of material, the more glass we need to put in to feed the furnaces. So you're losing a lot of good glass in the end, and then you have to purchase more to get the same amount out of your production process. By every step that we add into the recycling process, we add, of course, extra costs. That can be capex and also opex, because you need to invest in machinery, but also they cost, let's say, maintenance, spare parts, and so on and so on. And also, in the next step where you see the environmental impact, is that all these machines worked with compressed air, meaning you have compressors that deliver this. Now, one of the most energy consuming assets in these factories, beside of gas, is compressed air. So the more you shoot with these valves on this CSP parts, the more energy you consume, which of course is not good also for CO2 reduction. The next slide is how can you help us? And with you, I mean everybody listening to this and everyone where you're going to share this information with. I think first of all, individually, look at where you put your glass and where you put your ceramics. Please, you saw now two of these explanations from the glass furnace and the recyclers, that you really need to separate this. When you see that other people do not follow, let's say, your example, please tell them. Say, what's the consequence? People can get hurt in the glass furnaces. You saw this picture where this piece of glass, 1200 degrees, just missed an arm. You can't imagine what that happened. We don't want that at all. So follow the local guidelines. Also something, mostly when you go to a glass bin or you go to an area where there is waste collection, there is some kind of pictogram where you can see, okay, what can I throw in and what can't I throw in? Please follow those guidelines. And then last and not least, choose alternatives and not ceramics. Yeah, I always say, if you have an option, always go for glass. That's always the best choice. And then maybe to end the presentation, you see below, we stated Malta makes glass endless. And that's true, because glass is one of the few products that can be recycled over and over and over again. But it would be it would be way more easy if everyone helps us a little bit and don't use ceramics, let's say, in the glass bins. That would make our life easier. So this was the end of my presentation, Jean-Paul. So I think the floor is all yours now.
Thank you. Well, it will be shared. It will be shared, Danny, and I think we can also bring in Hans for the last 15 minutes. Essentially, that we have, we can have some questions. If you have any questions, please let me know in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll be keeping an eye out. We have two people here who know a lot about what can happen when ceramics and glass get mixed up in the waste stream. So this is the moment. I would like to. Yes, please,
may,
go ahead.
may I make one comment, please? Because to explain some things also for people. As Danny said, the specification, for instance, for CSP is very tight. For us, it's 20 grams a ton. It's already this for a long period, but that's not the issue. But even then, when you, for instance, look at a reasonable furnace that produces 300 tons of glass per day, with 75% cullet, and the average CSP pollution would be 10 milligrams per ton, so the half of the specification. But that would already mean that you put 820 kilograms of porcelain in that furnace in a year time, and that's a lot. And not only a lot on kilogram, but also on pieces, and that's just because I understand everybody said 10 ppm is not much, but it adds up in time.
Yeah, and we have a question that just came in actually for you, Hans, and I think it also links up with the shift in the container glass industry towards electric furnaces and the impact ceramics, well, let's say CSP at large, but let's talk about ceramics as well, may have in the future where the supply of cullet is going towards electric furnaces. Will there be any further impact from CSP or a different impact of CSP in those electric furnaces?
As far as I know, not on CSP, because CSP partly melts off in the furnace, and that's due to temperature. So that hasn't not do too much with the kind of furnace of how you operate it. What can differ is when the retention time, so the time the glass stays in the furnace, will be longer or shorter. That can be an impact on how much of the CSP melts in. But I think it's a very good question, because not CSP, but one of the issues you can get more with electrical furnaces can be on metal and other pollution you find on in glass cullet, because metal of, let's say, the electrical furnaces will be much more sensitive for metal pollution than the furnaces we have now in use.
Okay, and you've both explained that essentially the challenge of dealing with ceramics and glass is all about detecting. Then there's obviously the sorting phase that can have its problems, but first and foremost, it's a question of detection, right? I'm wondering, Danny. So you talked about the first step, which is manual at the input of the plant. Is there any technology that allows you to identify when a truck arrives and there's a batch that is offloaded onto your plant? Is there any way of understanding whether a batch is maybe more contaminated than another, and that you need to maybe be more aware of what will be coming in? Or is there any way of checking before the manual sorting whether you may have problems, and that can help you somehow?
Yeah, that's a good question. You have to make a difference. So if there's a truck coming in and that's discharging his, let's say, his load, then there is someone looking at the quality of this material. Of course, he cannot check everything because, yeah, when it unloads, it's like a heap, and inside it's nearly impossible to check. But if there is a lot of ceramics that you can see visually, we reject that truck and we say, okay, we cannot use this because we do not want this inside our factories. But if you look at the bigger incoming volumes, like with boat ships, like 4,000 tons, we really sample all these boats with a numerous amount of buckets. So that's also a manual job where someone in a laboratory checks the quality and says, okay, this input material is like, say, 5 kilograms per ton on CSP. We know in our factories which amount of steps we have. So we are pretty sure that if we put this into our factory, we will get a good and decent quality. And of course, when we do our job well, which Malta always does, at the end, we get a product that's approved and we can ship it out, let's say, to the glass furnaces. And we do not have the risk that there is a problem with too much contamination. So, yes, we always do this before it goes into our factories.
Sorry, I appear to have frozen for a second. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I was also wondering whether, I mean, there's been so much investment, right, in separate collection communication to citizens. Also, the collection infrastructure has improved a lot. Do you actually see a difference in terms of the incoming material? So Hans already mentioned that the recycling process has improved a lot, so the quality of the material has improved a lot over time. Do you see the same thing in collection, or has that not changed a lot over time? Danny, maybe first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. If you compare this with like 20 years ago, there is a huge difference on incoming streams. But you also have to see there is a big difference. If you look at, say, a bottle bank that's near, let's say, a pub or something, in those areas, you get some more pollution and contamination, of course, than when you go to, let's say, a dedicated glass collection scheme where you see that it's really good separated. Also a big difference on the way waste is collected. So in the UK, you have these MRF facilities. So that means that everything is commingled all together, goes to a MER facility, which has mostly the purpose of taking out the cardboard and the plastics, and you are left with a fraction which is glass, but it's really, really high contaminated. Of course, when you get this kind of material in, that's a huge difference between normal collected material. But I can say for sure that over time, people are more and more aware, and that's also good for this close the glass loop, that you see an improvement. On the other hand, you see an improvement, the specs get more and more tight, and you saw the reason why. So we even have to keep on investing and investing and investing to get the material within specification.
And that's I imagine quite a challenge, because usually in waste we talk a lot about tons and volume, right? But here what you're describing is not so much a question of tonnage. It's almost at the level of an item. Like if there is a single piece, that single piece, even if the risk is minimal, represents still a hazard. So ultimately, Hans, like the specifications that you build, they have to be somehow based on tonnage or grams or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's a single item that is a problem, right?
Yeah.
So that's.
But it's also depending how big that item is, because it still is a single item. But when it breaks in more pieces, you get from a bigger piece, you get smaller items. So that's a very difficult thing to state. Also, when it is the bigger problems, will sometimes give the problems before it reaches the containers, because it will already give problems in the hot end of our plants, where the bottles are formed, because then you get what the example I gave with the fire and with the health and safety risk, because then it can stop your lines. But I would like to do one thing on what Danny thought over the different collection types, because that's really a very big issue and a very big difference. Because I know that a long time ago a study has been done, and when you look at the yield, as Danny said earlier, can differ enormously by the way that the cullet is collected. And when you do the normal bottle bank, just try to also, you will see that there you will have a yield of between 90 and 95%. When you look at, for instance, the UK material, the multi-recycle facility material, there you will have a yield about 70% as maximum. So that really, the way of the raw material is collected has a very big influence on the pollution in the material our recyclers get in.
Yeah, and so if we spend a moment then on the recovery of ceramics, because that's obviously the other part of this discussion. One is glass, the other thing is ceramics, and there's a question also here on what can be done with the ceramics. I mean, Danny, once you've sorted the ceramics out, is there anything you can do with that? I mean, can it be recycled somewhere? Can it be sent to a recycling process, or is it inevitably then a cost for the glass cullet recycling facilities?
Yeah, in the past it was always, I would say, a landfill. So there was no recycling opportunity. So when time evolves, also the processes, I would say, get better and better on recycling, let's say, processes. So at this point, we do have outlets for the ceramics, but compared with glass, and even the same like glass, you have to make it really clean to get it, let's say, recycled again into another product. Because if you look at ceramics, that has different application in building and whatever aggregate or whatever you want to put it, but it has to be clean. So again, there is an extra step needed to separate probably some glass with some plastics and a cork from these ceramic materials, and then you can go and bring it to the next step.
Is there any way of knowing whether ceramics are more present in the materials coming from commercial sources, so the hospitality sector, as opposed to households, relatively speaking? I mean, is the impact of ceramics in glass waste a bigger thing when it comes to hospitality? Or are you not even really able to identify the difference, because in the end the material gets collected somehow together,
Yeah, probably the last one. So you have all this collection parts that come together in one big hub, and then it goes into a truck and goes to the recycler. So it's really difficult to tell how much percentage is coming from the hospitalities and how much from the household. So I think over the years the households are kind of okay. I still remember that my mother, when she had a glass bottle, they turned off the cap, put it under the drain, put water in it, made it clean, and then put it away. So yeah, that's an ideal world, of course. So I think households probably is less polluted than the hospitality, but that's just a gut feeling, I would say.
Okay, brilliant. Now, I have a final question, which I think would be quite nice for you to reflect on. It goes a little bit beyond the specific topic of ceramics and glass, but ultimately will have an impact. If you could pass one piece of legislation to improve color in some way, right? Quality of the incoming material, but also to some extent quantity, right, as well. What would that be? Maybe Hans, you want to have a go first?
Oh yeah, I have a very simple solution, a simple one, but that's only for a laugh. I would say make glass the most preferred material, and reduce the other materials, packaging materials, where now some liquids are filled in, because I still think that glass is the best material to fill in products, because it's reusable, it stays reusable, and it is, when it is collected in the right way, 100% recyclable.
Okay, so you're talking here more about getting more cullet means having more glass available for the cullet. Danny, what would be your
quality there now, but when you look at legislation, it's very difficult. Legislation could be that municipalities are, let's say, more are obliged to make sure that they choose the best collection type. When you say everybody should do it with the bottle bins collecting, then that would already improve the overall collection and also reduce the pollution. When you look at the UK, where, as Daniel said, where they have the multi-recycle facility material, that really is of a much worse quality than the bottle bank collection. So when you would make legislation on that, that would improve the situation.
Okay, so more glass to be made available, and monomaterial separate collection for glass packaging. Danny, what would be your sort of key piece of legislation to improve, let's say, cullet quality as much as quantity, right?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with Hans, but I have to say something else, of course. So I was thinking, make it mandatory, make it a law that on every bottle bank that there is in Holland or Belgium and everywhere around the world, you are mandatory to put a bank to collect ceramics. Because if you have it all in one place and you have a bottle and you have a cup, and you can throw that on the left and then on the right, I'm pretty sure people will do that. But if there is no bin for the ceramics, guess where it ends up? So I would make that a law that there needs to be a collection for ceramics, not next to the bottle bank.
Okay,
I think that's a very good one.
Thank you, Hans.
Yeah. That's a creative spirit here to add an extra separate collection step. Also for the other materials, could be one thing. So thank you so much, Danny, Hans, for having shared your insights. I hope it will help as we build this awareness raising campaign, that we have the communication, but also then some of the explanation behind why we're talking about this issue. And I think you went to great lengths to make it practical and very pragmatic. So thanks a lot for your time on that. Thanks, Danny and Hans.
You're welcome, Jean-Paul, and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and obviously the thanks is extended to our colleagues in the hospitality sector, Jack and Marine, who were with us as well. It leaves me then to finish this episode probably with a few words on our Europe-wide awareness raising campaign. So we will be making this video available, obviously Europe-wide, through our Close the Glass Loop channels. We're also obviously inviting all our European partners to share that widely. I know obviously Hotrec will, and many others are invited to share that with us. We will make this also then available on the national level, as we mentioned. We can customize it, as we mentioned, but we will also be building a web page on the Close the Glass Loop website where we will have all the relevant materials to this campaign in one place. So that's the various presentations that you've seen today and some of the other kinds of pieces of material that we have around glass packaging and the hospitality sector. All of that will be made available in a single place. Our goal with this is, it's the first time actually that Close the Glass Loop is trying to build a communication campaign around glass recycling. What we see as a potential is to try and identify a very specific issue, in this case, the contamination of glass waste by ceramics in the hospitality sector. It's like a niche issue, and it's something where we feel that maybe on national level, it's difficult to specifically invest time, resources into a specific campaign on this. And so maybe Close the Glass Loop can actually play that role of centralizing the effort, but disseminating very broadly the final results, so that we take on board let's say the time and the resources necessary, and we make something available for the national level. We think that this could be a model that could be replicated in other niche segments of what we need to communicate in order to improve glass collection and recycling. And so in a way, this is also a test campaign for Close the Glass Loop to see if this kind of interaction between a European level and a local level can work. It's our ambition that we're able to have a Europe-wide relevant central campaign, even if we know that local sorting instructions will always remain local and local collection systems will always remain local. But maybe it's still possible to combine the two in an intelligent way. That's what we hope we can achieve at Close the Glass Loop. And hopefully you'll be able to work with us to actually make that a reality. So that was a final word then on the video. I will then leave you also with an introduction to our next episode. That will be taking place on the 19th of March. And there we will be discussing how well countries actually do with a deposit return system on glass packaging for recycling. Okay, there are some countries that have included glass packaging for recycling in the deposit return system that they have established, and we want to try and understand how much of an impact that actually has on recycling, on the recycling rates in general. So we will be communicating soon also on the speakers and the setup for that event. But I think it will be extremely timely and important, because many different EU member states are considering, those that haven't yet, are considering setting up a deposit return system. It's usually driven by their obligations on especially PET, but obviously then the consideration is broadened to whether or not one should include other materials. And so the discussion will really look at what is happening today and what are some of the considerations that one needs to have when thinking of introducing glass packaging into a deposit return system or not. So I hope you will be able to be with us there. We have the link for registration already in the chat. And for the rest, thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks for participating in our episode today. And help us relay our Sound of Glass video, and let's reach out to these hospitality establishments. Thank you so much. Take care and see you next time. Bye-bye.